Thank you, Alicia. Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dimitar. You'll be seeing me around today. I'll be having the pleasure of leading our interview corners today, and I'm delighted to be joined by Claudia from AT&T. We had a wonderful debate, riled up some emotions. So now I think it's time to hear from industry. And with you throughout the years, we've had numerous conversations, public and private, about developments facing our telecom sectors, facing our rollout of digital infrastructure. So maybe let's reflect. 2025 has been an exciting year, I'm sure, for you. What's around the corner in 26 when it comes to AT&T?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here today. It's always a pleasure to exchange at the European Ideas Forum. And congratulations also to the Martin Center for the great event that you're putting together. I'm always amazed by the discussion and by the speakers. Indeed, 2025 has been a pivotal year for AT&T. As our mission to enable connectivity, we set targets and goals to expand our fiber reach to 60 million consumers and business locations across the US by 2030. We also committed $5 billion to help narrow the digital divide. And so these, to achieve those strategic goals, we also made strategic investment in 2025, or at least agreed to. First of all, we announced that we would acquire all of the Lumen's mass business fiber business, which would add 1 million consumer to our network, and also across 4 million locations and in 11 states in the US. We also announced an acquisition of 23 billion worth of spectrum from EchoStar, which would allow to add 50 megahertz in the lower band and mid-band spectrum across AT&T Holdings. So those strategic investments really position us well to address those targets, but also to create the infrastructure of tomorrow. And as of the third quarter of 25, our 5G network achieved more than 320 million consumers, across the US, and this is very exciting. But while we are proud of our footprint in the US, we are equally certainly proud of our presence at international level, where we are a global leader of business communication. We connect more than 2,000 global multinational Fortune 500 companies. We equally connect small businesses and government agencies. So as we look, across the corner, as you have been saying, to 2026, I think that one of the priorities is to continue building the network of tomorrow. And the way to do that is certainly to invest in the modern technology, in the wireless fiber network technologies that can really enable the creation of faster, more reliable network to address the growing demand of consumers, but also of the businesses, and to equip them to be successful in whatever they need to achieve and do. So it's very exciting.
Thanks for this, scoping exercise, what's happening globally in the US, but maybe indeed let's zoom in Europe. And you're talking about the investment, talking about opportunities. How do you see Europe when it comes to opportunities and challenges, when it comes to telecoms, when it comes to infrastructure? Give us a little snapshot there.
No, certainly. First of all, I have to say that the growing internet demand for access, it's very exciting for companies, as it allows you to continue building on, for us, more than 100 years of history of innovation, and to expand on the way we connect our consumers. I think when it comes to Europe, first of all, we have legal entity a bit everywhere in Europe, so in almost every member state. And so one challenge that we can observe is certainly the fact that there is a highly fragmented regulatory market. So what, for example, Mrs. Montserrat was saying just before applied to the energy sector is equal in a way for the telecom sector, in the sense that it's a very fragmented, and we need to deepen the digital single market. It's not yet there. You can be confronted to duplicative rules sometimes that comes from different frameworks, but also in a way of different rules across the member states. Now, I'm very encouraged and very positively impressed by the fact that Europe is acting upon the Draghi and letter recommendation that we were discussing just a year ago. And there is a wave of simplification and a wave of harmonization calls. And so this is very important because Europe has really an opportunity and to be on the driving seat and to enact on those policies and to bring in simplification and harmonization, which can create a consistent outcome across the region. And so this is very important. I think nowadays various policymakers also recognize the importance of having reliable and faster network, because this can be a competitive advantage for a country that can be competitive by having a modernized infrastructure. And so while you have these needs and those recognition, those premises, it can really create as well the opportunity of shaping the right policy framework that can enable that. And one way to do that is certainly to create the rules of the road that are transparent, that are clear, that are certain, and that don't shift. In fact, investment normally comes when investors can rely on a stable regulatory framework, but also on an important market structure. In fact, what's happening also in Europe, apart from the various fragmented market, you also have a high presence of operators, and so it's a highly regulated industry, and it's very difficult for European telecom operators to be able and compete. And so I think Europe really needs to, has a unique opportunity right now to alleviate a little bit the burden on those operators and certainly simplify some of the rules that have been out there.
Yeah, simplify, one of the key words of this mandate. But let's stay on this topic a bit. You mentioned a couple of avenues which need to be addressed. How can European policymakers address some of these challenges so we can have a better environment when it comes to telecoms, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to investment? How do you see it?
Well, first of all, I can say that, for example, in the US, government-friendly business policies have really allowed investment to thrive. And if you look at what happened in the US, the telecom industry has really been investing a lot in the infrastructure. Since 1996, they have been investing around $2.2 trillion in the infrastructure, and AT&T has been recognized for the 14th year in a row as one of the top 5 companies for capital investment. Now, the reason I say that is because I think this is an important example. While, as I was saying before, you need to strike the right balance. You cannot certainly have a free market land. You need to have the security and regulatory framework in place, but you also need to create the principle that allow the telecommunication operators or operators in any case to achieve the goal that they need to achieve without being too prescriptive. And for example, in our case as well, in Europe, we are a business-to-business operator, and so already tailoring the provisions and the requirements, regulatory requirements, to the type of the world that we have, I think it would be go already a long way, and also continuing on simplification. I mean, Europe has started with by presenting the digital omnibus, that can really bring some clear result, as for example, the environmental omnibus has just yesterday they reached an agreement on which they have been talking about how many savings this law will bring, and I'm sure that this can be replicated also in the digital world by simplifying the reporting obligation. I mean, just to give you a hint, in our European team is doing more than 350 reports a year, so it's quite extensive in different languages and different requirements. So I think that this can really be an opportunity to continue along that way.
Yeah, the point is not to draft reports. The point is to get the business in Europe. Let's stay for a minute on narratives. We've been having for years now these discussions online, offline. I mean, different media, different stakeholders, always pushing the message. The EU is lacking behind when it comes to certain infrastructure, when it comes to investment, when it comes to 5G, 6G, spectrum allocations. Is the US really that far ahead? How do you see the dynamic? Maybe in a minute, how do you see this kind of narrative going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the US, as I have been saying, they have really been investing a lot in the infrastructure, the telecom operator, which really is a game changer because you need investment in order to create the infrastructure. And the reason why they have been investing also because there is a policy framework that helps to do that from one end, but also it's a quite competitive industry, but it's not as competitive as in the EU, meaning that we have less operators, there's more consolidation, and you need to create the condition for European operators to be able and have their return on investment. Now, how do you do that? You do that through, as I was explaining, the policy frameworks, but also changing potentially the market structure or allowing more consolidation to happen. And in the US, there have been recently bills that have been passed that really give authority to the FCC to auction spectrum, which is essential. And that's and we have been acquiring, as I just announced, or we are in the process of acquiring the 23 billion spectrum from that company, EchoStar, which will enable our infrastructure to, to be more, in a way, able to meet the growing demand of the consumers. Because as technology evolves, you can certainly see that consumers not only are consuming more content, but also generating and uploading more content. So also the upstream communication part is quite important. So just to return to your point, I think in the US there is also a different environment in the sense that our approach is mostly market-driven approach with an ex post most of the time type of approach, versus in Europe you have an ex ante type of regulatory approach, and more rules also that are the telecom industry is very heavily regulated.
Indeed, more rules. As a final point, maybe let's talk about consumers. We were discussing more abstract concepts, more macro points, but investment in this telecom infrastructure, how does this translate in better networks? How does this translate to actual tangible benefits for users and consumers?
Yeah, modernized networks are certainly bring benefit to consumer because, as I was saying, they equip them with reliable, fast, and secure network to address their demand and their capacity and be able to, also for businesses, it's quite important to have a reliable infrastructure. And as you have emerging technologies, also quite important that we sit together at the table and that we coordinate between public and private on those issues. And at AT&T, we have been in the business of connecting people for more than 150 years, or almost 150 years. And certainly we know that to be able and connect people in the 21st century, you need a modernized infrastructure. You need an infrastructure to invest in newer fiber network technology that can create this reliable network. And I think that it's important also precisely, to look at the different example and take inspiration wherever it's possible.
Wherever it's possible. And Claudia, thank you so much for reminding us that investment in infrastructure, in grids, we're talking about this from sustainability to digital infrastructure. So I think this is a very loud and clear message, not only for people here in the audience, but also for our policymakers. Claudia, thank you so much for this conversation. Alicia, back to you.